Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here today to discuss the government's programme for reforming the justice system. I believe the argument for changing the way we do things is clear, compelling, and in the current economic circumstances, unarguable. But large-scale reform can only ever be successful if it sets free those on the front line and harnesses their energies and commitment. And working with victims and offenders day in, day out, you are delivering the justice system. And without your delivery of reform, we will change and improve nothing. And so with all those different points of engagement in the criminal justice system that you individually here will be managing with victims and offenders, in all of our reforms, it is your contribution in getting the delivery right once we've got the policy right that will be critical. And we deserve a justice system that protects the innocent, punishes those who choose to break our laws, and supports criminals to turn away from crime. And we have to achieve this whilst living within our means. And to meet these aspirations, the justice system needs to become both more efficient and more effective. So whilst we do have an extraordinary challenge to deliver this programme in these austere times, we should recognise that many countries would envy the strength and reputation of our justice system. Many excellent aspects of that system have deservedly created this international reputation, and we should not ignore that. For example, the enduring commitment and professionalism of those working in our police stations, courts, prisons, and probation offices, and including, of course, our numerous partners from the voluntary and private sectors. The effective control of our most violent and unpredictable offenders, achieved through effective sentencing and targeted intensive supervision under multi-agency public protection arrangements. And the contribution that local criminal justice partnerships and integrated offender management teams make to addressing the problems of greatest concern in their local areas. And when we look around the world, we then see appalling disasters that have just happened in Honduras, a disaster that happened in a Chilean prison not very long ago, and I well recall having the Chilean Justice Minister come to see me and to discover that they have no probation service at all in the Chilean system, which has therefore caused this hideous concentration of prisoners in their overcrowded prison estate, and then directly led to the disaster, as I understand it, that then happened in Chile. And we should be in the business of we are a global leader in the criminal justice area, and we do have very talented people working in the criminal justice system, in the Ministry of Justice, in the National Offender Management Service, all of whom, surprise, surprise, other nations turn to for advice on how they can reorder their criminal justice systems more efficiently and more effectively and more in the wider interests of justice. So we should reflect that we do operate from a position of strength. And so those are just a few examples that I've given of where we should rightly be proud. But the impact and potential benefits of our strength and our reputation are undermined by long-term and well-documented structural weaknesses. First, imprisonment as a blunt form of punishment, pun intended. Too often, our most prolific offenders cycle and recycle through the prison system. For too many, prison holds no fears and does little to curb their behaviour on the outside. And this is borne out by unacceptably high reoffending rates. Roughly half of prisoners reoffend within a year, committing an average of 4 new offences in the year after release. We have innovation and progress strangled by red tape. There are countless people on the front line doing brilliant work who feel hugely frustrated that the system prevents them from doing more. Controls from the centre to ensure safe and secure services too often fail to give those working with offenders the support they need to truly innovate and make a difference. Instead of enabling our staff, the system appears to constrain them. And this is a reflection that all my predecessors as Conservative spokesmen in opposition in this field on prisons and offender management all came to the same conclusion, is you would look around the estate and there would be fantastic examples of really good work, and we were finding it all, and the system appeared to find it very, very difficult indeed in order to make these examples of really good practice systemic. And of course, victims, sometimes treated as an afterthought by our system. And of course, we have to concentrate on the offender and strike the right balance between their punishment and rehabilitation. But what about the victims of crime? Through no choice of their own, these people have to live with the consequences of crime and the fear, distress, and disruption that it brings. And we must do more to support them to recover and get on with their lives. These failings really matter. The annual prison bill is over £3 billion, and we spend roughly £40,000 each locking up one prisoner for a year. That is almost enough to cover the starting salary of 2 new nurses. That is a high price to pay to keep someone off the streets. For them to walk straight back into a life of crime is, of course, appalling. And that's before you consider the economic, social, and emotional costs associated with reoffending. We must do more to break the cycle of reoffending and help offenders to become productive members of society, or this expensive system is failing everyone. Past governments have talked tough, but not delivered real change. Instead of choosing to throw more money at the problem, has been their solution. Under this government, prisons and probation are contributing to the country's deficit reduction plans by generating significant efficiencies across the spending review period. The days of undisciplined spending are over. My department alone must find nearly £2 billion worth of annual savings across its planned budget by 2014-15. We need to learn to cut our cloth differently and provide public services whilst reducing the overall costs. So it is an incredibly exciting time to be an Under-Secretary of State in the Ministry of Justice, where we are looking at all of this policy reform. We have no choice but to propose a radical series of reforms which will support a more intelligent approach to driving down crime, one that punishes offenders properly and works more sensibly to ensure that the system cuts reoffending. These can be broken down under 3 broad themes. First, structural change. And this relates to the changes in legislation and government policy to realign the system to focus on improved services. Right now, our prisons are too often places of idleness, with prisoners locked in their cells most of the time, doing little that is productive. We are seeking to introduce a full working week as far as we can across the prison estate so that our prisons will become places of meaningful work. And to make this sustainable, we will support the private sector, including local businesses to prisons, to get involved in training, providing work, and employing prisoners on release. And doing all of these profitably, because we have no choice, we have no resources to invest in this extra work. So we're preparing a code of practice with the CBI and others, which will ensure that we don't take jobs in the community or that we compete unfairly from prisons. Prisoners will learn the discipline of regular working hours and acquire new skills and experience. And part of any earnings will then be available to help compensate the victims of crime. And this change is supported by the Legal Aid, Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Bill, which is currently before the House of Lords. Besides taking the necessary opportunity in the bill to address some of the inherited disasters, such as indeterminate sentences for public protection, and to make sensible adjustments to the sentencing and remand framework, the bill also steps up our efforts to tackle the mental health and drug addiction problems that underpin so much offending. We're piloting drug-free wings in our jails to ensure that more prisoners get clean. We're rolling out a national liaison program for police custody and in courts to ensure that people with mental health problems are diagnosed and treated early. And in the community, we plan to beef up disposals for low-level offences to allow the police to issue enhanced penalty notices and cautions so that problems are nipped in the bud, whilst avoiding the delay of bringing offenders before the courts. We will deliver real neighbourhood justice, reconnect services with local communities, and reconceive the way that we deliver summary justice. We will publish a white paper later this year, which will set out in more detail our proposals for swift, sure, and visible justice. And in addition to the proposals set out in the bill, we are currently reviewing the community sentences framework, which today fails to command public confidence as being sufficiently tough and effective as a response to crime. So we will shortly publish a set of proposals for consultation, which will aim to ensure that community sentences are both properly punitive and rehabilitative. Our aim is to give sentences increased powers and flexibility to ensure that sentences in the community increase the chances of an offender going straight and aren't seen as a soft option. The second theme I want to discuss is that of devolution and the transfer of responsibility and accountability away from the centre to local commissioners and providers. By granting increased autonomy and reducing central control, we will enable services to become more efficient and effective in responding to local needs. One major change is the forthcoming introduction of elected police and crime commissioners in 42 of the 43 police authority areas in England and Wales. The election of the commissioners will introduce a visible, public-facing figurehead for tackling crime, someone with a clear line of accountability to the community. Commissioners will coordinate with other justice service providers to ensure that agencies in their area are pulling together in their approach to tackling crime and disorder, refocus to meet local need. Increasingly, we will use competition as a key lever for improving services. Our guiding principle is that competition will apply to all services not bound by law to the public sector, unless there are compelling reasons why it should not. Competition will place an increased emphasis on the outcomes that services deliver. This is about quality, not just about price. Fair and open competition will help increase efficiency and raise standards so that the system becomes more effective at punishing offenders, reducing crime and reoffending. And it will allow us to tap into a wider market of expertise and opens the door for innovative partnerships between providers from all sectors. Our latest round of prison competitions is underway, covering 9 establishments, with the results due in the autumn. And whilst we've recompeted some services, such as prisoner escorts, we are now competing community payback for the first time. And we've also been conducting a comprehensive review of probation services and will shortly be consulting on our plans for reform of this part of the system. Building on the principles of competition, we will increasingly pay by results for offender services. And this represents a smarter approach to commissioning, prioritising the achievement of real outcomes over processes and performance targets, and only paying for success. Put simply, if providers working with offenders manage to achieve a reduction in reoffending rates, they will be rewarded for their success, with overachievement met with increased rewards funded from the savings that will then accrue to the justice system. But failure will mean that some or all of the contract value will not be paid. And the purpose here is that providers are free to introduce new and innovative approaches. And we will encourage organisations from outside the public sector to enter the market to bring new ideas and expertise into the system. Payment by results is an extremely exciting idea, with, I believe, a huge potential to transform the way offender services are designed and delivered. We're running a series of initial pilots before applying the approach more broadly across the system. The first pilots are underway, with further pilots to begin shortly. Finally, we want to secure a better deal for the victims of crime, whose lives are scarred by the actions of others and the witnesses who help bring offenders to justice. We are currently consulting on a programme of reforms, and the principles underlying our proposals are that support should be given to those with the greatest need. Support to victims need to be timely and appropriate. Local services have to reflect local need, and offenders should pay for their crimes. The reforms set out in our consultation will deliver a more intelligent and coherent service for victims of crime. And despite the savings that we are expecting to make in the criminal injuries compensation scheme, Our overall ambition is that total level of spending levels on victims, through a combination of compensation, counselling and support, will in the short term remain the same and should start to rise significantly as the reparation and restorative culture changes begin to take effect. Current finite funding will be used more wisely. So instead of compensation going to those with comparatively less serious injuries and to those who have themselves broken the law, it will be targeted on the most serious injuries and the overall burden on the taxpayer reduced. But we will raise additional money from the perpetrators of crime through the victim surcharge and other financial impositions and use that money to deliver the support services which many victims need more than compensation. It is our intention to move decisions about local priorities for most victim services away from Whitehall, so that the vast majority of funding is in the hands of democratically accountable police and crime commissioners, who will commission services according to local need. We will introduce a new, simpler victims code, signed up to by all the relevant agencies, with a straightforward complaints procedure, replacing the current confusing system. The overall effect of these proposals will be a more flexible and tailored system of support for victims of crime, with the vast majority of decisions about what services are needed made at the local level. Delivering the reforms that I've set out today is an enormous challenge, which, if it's met, will deliver a more effective, civilized, and sustainable justice system. However, it can only be delivered together. Well-intentioned strategies and policies that are perfect in principle are useless without the support of those delivering them on the front line. And we will succeed in making a real difference if we pull in the same direction. Counterintuitively, that is why we're moving away from central direction, targets, and controls towards professional discretion and a focus on outcomes. We all want to see a justice system that works for everyone, and my objective is to enable you to help deliver that. Thank you very much.